Hi everyone. In this video, I would like to discuss an article by Bell Hooks called Overcoming White Supremacy, a comment. Let me share the screen here. Good. Let me get my little annotate little thing here. Okay. Now, I'd like to point out that Bell Hooks, who is a famous and very important theorist on many things in philosophy and in the humanities in general, and social sciences, a very important and distinguished commentator on social issues, especially having to do with race and gender. Her name, the name that she takes is Bell Hooks. It escapes me what her given name was at birth, but she takes the name of her grandmother, who she admired a great deal. And I'm not quite sure why, perhaps out of a certain kind of modesty, but she does spell her name with a lowercase b and a lowercase h. So for a long time, I, like many people, when I would see her name, I would correct the whatever I was reading or in an email or something like that. But she actually likes her name to be small b, small h. I'm sure she wouldn't care if people capitalize it in certain situations, but that's the way that she presents it. So it seems respectful to me to try to preserve that as much as possible. In Overcoming White Supremacy, Hooks is talking about the state of the movement to sort of liberate the oppression of people of color, especially in our country. Gosh, in the United States. Which is where I happen to be. You might be watching this and you are in a completely different country. So, our world, let's say that she is trying to, one of the leaders of the movement in feminism and the movement to overcome racism and for racial equality. She speaks fairly strongly in this article. That is just to say, and maybe that in a way is unfair, she speaks directly and she says what she means. And that is one of the reasons I chose this particular article, and it's one of the reasons why she's one of my favorite people to read on this subject. So let's see some of the things that she says in this fairly short article. She covers a pretty good little bit of ground. So she makes some good points that I would like us in this class to pay attention to. After some initial things in her first paragraph, we'll keep this fairly short, so I want to get to a few things. She says that I try to remember when the word racism ceased to be the term which best expressed for me exploitation of Black people and other people of color in this society, and when I began to understand that the most useful term was white supremacy. By the way, this term people of color, if you're unfamiliar or just maybe entering into study of this area and not sure about this, people of color is different than the antiquated and derogatory term colored people. So sometimes in my classes, I'll get well-meaning folks who kind of use those terms interchangeably. The culturally sensitive term would be people of color or a person of color, but not the other word, okay? So what she's obviously saying here is that when we're talking about the exploitation of race, of people of color, more so than even perhaps racism, that the more useful term was white supremacy. And there's, why might that be the case? Why might it be the case that someone would think that white supremacy was a better way to describe a society that historically and still to this day exploits and oppresses people of color? Well, for myself, I could think that racism is a sort of it makes one kind of emphasis. Let's just leave it at that. Whereas white supremacy makes a different kind of emphasis. It's sort of more of a positive emphasis on, when I say a positive, I don't mean good. I mean positive emphasis in that it shows what this, if Hooks is right, it shows what the society is for rather than what the society is against in term racism. So her point seems to be that white supremacy is what Western societies are. That's what they promote. That's what they sort of hold up as the ideal sort of person, the ideal set of practices are going to be those of white people, that those are the superior practices. Let's skip down a little bit. It is the very small but highly visible liberal movement away from the perpetuation of overtly racist discrimination, exploitation, and oppression of Black people, which often masks how all-pervasive white supremacy is in this society, both as ideology and as behavior. Okay, so let's take a couple of things here. She's saying that there's a small liberal movement that is trying to move society away from overt racism, exploitation, and oppression of Black people. First of all, oppression, when you think of the term oppression, think of oppressing down. In a lot of cases, oppression, the word is sort of traditionally been used for like political dictatorships where dictators oppress their citizens. But the word has broader meaning as well. And if you just take the word as what it says, it's oppressing down, holding down. And you think about like holding back or creating barriers around some people to prevent their movement, their free movement in society. And so when in literature, race, class, and gender literature, you will see the term oppression used, and what's meant there is the prevention of the free movement in many different ways of subordinate groups, groups that are not part of the dominant group, which in our society, there's that hour again, in the United States society, that would be rich white men, or the dominant group. And by saying the dominant group, that's saying that, speaking within this literature, the dominant group is the one that tends to hold the positions of power, that tends to have the laws and the norms, the practices, the values that benefit them the most. And it's not necessarily a deliberate kind of thing. It's not a bunch of evil white men behind big closed corporate doors making conspiracies. The oppressors in any situation could be the nicest people. And you can imagine very nice slaveholders back in slavery times in the United States. Personally, very nice people, kind to their slaves, as well as to anybody else, not meaning anyone any harm. That's considered to be a lack of overt racism or overt sexism, overt homophobia, and so forth. But that's different than the idea that so many race, class, and gender theorists like Hooks are arguing about. While it's very important that we talk about individuals, I would think that the most important thing is the society-wide structures that tend to hold oppressive practices in place. And that's what's going on in this article that I think is very important to understand, especially in a relatively early philosophy class like this one. So, okay, so I got away a little bit from, got in my explanatory mode. She's saying that the very small but highly visible liberal movement away from the perpetuation of racial discrimination, etc., that often masks the all-pervasive white supremacy in the society. So in other words, the actions of liberal activists, and because of when this was written, I believe this was written in the 90s, late 80s or the early 90s, she has in mind here people in the 70s and 80s when the feminist movement and the race movements were really starting to gather some steam and political influence in terms of a movement, as apart from the civil rights movement itself in the 50s and 60s. But even stretching back to there, she's saying that, she appears to be saying that it was the liberal activism itself could be seen to even mask or sort of hide the actual white supremacy that was going on in the society, and how the dominant values in society were those of white people, and especially white men. So let's continue on here. There's that word, by the way, ideology, right? Collection of ideas that tend to make people believe in a certain way and tend to always sort of act in certain ways. Okay, so let's, okay, so can I get over here? Okay, how did I, okay, let me, oh, there we go. Sorry for turning it blue. Okay, here we go. So moving on here, white supremacy is the term here, is a much more useful term for understanding the complicity, right, sort of the working together of people of color in upholding and maintaining racial hierarchies that do not involve force. Then the term internalized racism. So the idea you can maybe think is internalized racism would be where racism sort of goes inside. And so if I'm a person of color, my racist attitudes towards my own social group could be like in my own mind, just like they're in everybody else's mind. So white supremacy is a more useful term for understanding the complicity of people of color. So that means that people of color themselves have contributed to this, not meaning to, of course, but just in upholding these racial hierarchies, and without even involving any force. It doesn't even have to be sort of overt slavery or something going on here, or overt racism necessarily, for there to be this internalized sort of thing going on. The term white supremacy enables us to recognize not only that Black people are socialized to embody the values and attitudes of white supremacy, but that we can exercise white supremacist control over other Black people. So this control, she's arguing here, is internal, right? It's not even overt, you can't see it. A new terminology, she says, must accurately name the way we as Black people directly exercise power over one another when we perpetuate white supremacist beliefs, right? Without meaning to. Once again, just to be clear on that. Assimilation, this idea of assimilation, is a strategy deeply rooted in the ideology of white supremacy. Now you'll see I'm going to skip around a little bit and sometimes construct sentences across sentences just to sort of get to some of the main points. It's the way that I often underline things in articles. So assimilation, what is assimilation? Well, she's going to talk a little bit about assimilation. Assimilation in this context would be, well, you're going to have equality among black people and white people a lot quicker if black people would just assimilate to white culture. So just be more like white people. So if you're a black person and you get a job at a mostly white company, then try to fit in. Try to not talk like you talk around your friends. Try not to. I mean, if that is a way of talking that is different in. Yeah, I mean, in other words, just try to fit in. And the fitting in, she's saying, this assimilation is what is unwittingly by white people, perhaps, serving to deny the identities, the cultural heritage, the sort of the rich experiences that people of color have. Let's see. Racial integration. Here we go. So integration, right? Racial integration translated into assimilation ultimately serves to reinforce and maintain white supremacy. Again, this is the idea that white people are superior, very sort of simply here put. When black people enter social contexts that remain unchanged, unaltered, in no way stripped of the framework of white supremacy, we are pressured to assimilate. We are rewarded for assimilation, right? You'll get better jobs. If you think in terms of sexist assimilation also. It seems that, I mean, I've heard this, I know that women being counseled to, as she goes up for promotion, to try to act more like a man. This is all the idea of assimilation here. And so that brings up questions about what does this do to the person who is supposed to assimilate? Is it really fair to that person, for one thing? Does it destroy something important, or does it start to unravel something important in that person, in possibly even a whole, in everybody in a way? It could unravel something in everybody, perhaps. Let's see where I am. We must continually challenge, protest, resist, while working to leave no gaps in our defense that will allow us to be crushed. Okay? Resisting the pressure to assimilate is a part of our struggle to end white supremacy. Okay. Interesting things to think about there. Okay. Okay, she moves to a slightly different but related topic, really teaching history in a new way. Okay, she gives an example of being at someone's house, or where she was a guest with at a white male lawyer's house, and he informed me that someone had commented to him that children are learning very little history these days in school, that the attempt to be all-inclusive, to talk about Native Americans, blacks, women, etc., has led to a fragmented focus on particular representative individuals with no larger historical framework. So you think about Christopher Columbus, the person who discovered America, and so on. She says, really teaching history in a new way would require, okay, so here again is this idea of assimilation. So some folks would think, mostly white folks, might think that, well, look, everyone has to learn the common history, the important history, the real history, say, of America, where Christopher Columbus discovered America. And what Hooks is arguing is that, would that really be an assimilation to the truth, or is that really just racial integration as another way to silence the culture that people of color may come from? Really teaching history in a new way would require abandoning the old myths informed by white supremacy, like the notion that Columbus discovered America as if no one else was here, as if there was just this sort of do, hey, there's America. This is a great thing I just did. I discovered it. I'm being Christopher Columbus there, I guess you can tell. It would mean talking about imperialism, colonization, about the Africans who came before Columbus. Would be talking about genocide, about ways the legal and governmental structures supported and upheld slavery and apartheid. This history can be taught only when the perspectives of teachers are no longer shaped by white supremacy. That is the real history of America, the real true things that happened. Okay, so let's go down a little bit, skipping around. It's really a great article all the way through. I'm just going to hit some of the high points. Coupled with economic forces exerting pressure, many radicals, now she's going back here to talking about the liberals that were, which are, white liberals joined the effort in the fight against racism in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and so she would acknowledge that it was a very positive effect, but it also had a negative effect. So, a critique like this paper, she's not arguing that that it's all bad, that what liberals did was bad, that it was what she's arguing about here, and this is what's so important in philosophy in general, is to be intellectually fair and transparent, to be charitable to someone's view, and to really look and see what they're saying, not just what it sort of sounds like. If it sounds radical, then it must be radical, because it's so different than what I'm used to. What she's saying here is that there was this unintended effect from the way that early movement white liberals were conducting themselves, that because of economic forces, and what she means here is because after the college protest days, white liberals wanted to get jobs. They wanted to get good jobs. And so all of a sudden now it's, maybe we can't fight so hard against white supremacy, against racism. Maybe we can do better by fighting from the inside. So we're going to go out, we're going to get these really lucrative jobs on Wall Street and corporations and so on. And we still have your back, but we're going to, get some money as well. So she says, coupled with economic forces exerting pressure, right? The pressure to succeed, the pressure to get money and so on. Many radicals despaired of the possibility that this white supremacist capitalist patriarchy could even really be changed. Tragically, many radical whites who had been allies in the Black liberation struggle began to question whether the struggle to end racism was really that significant, or to suggest that the struggle was over as they moved into their new liberal positions. Right? Well, maybe it's over already. Maybe we already did succeed, so we're just going to go over here and, take this job that makes a good amount of money a year, buy a house and a car and everything, and we're still here. We still are for your movement, but we have to, if they're being honest, exercise our privilege to enter more in depth in a society that's set up for us. It is no wonder that black radicals met these betrayals with despair and hopelessness. What had all the contemporaries struggled to resist racism really achieved? What did it mean to have this period of radical questioning of white supremacy, of black is beautiful, only to witness a few years later the successful mass production? Now she starts to give some examples here of what happened later. So in the 70s and the 80s, you got corporations that would sell hair care products to straighten the person of color's hair, right? That became the style. Now, why did it become the style? Is that just grow out of spontaneously? Well, it's again this sort of cultural pressure to assimilate into white culture, to be like white people. Let's see, black women suggest that these trends are only related to personal preferences and have no relation to racism. Okay, so many black people say that what they like most about Bill Cosby, the Bill Cosby show. Now, there was a time, some of you might be quite young, but there was a time when Bill Cosby had a show on TV, and it was thought to be very mainstream by a lot of people. He was a doctor. I didn't really watch it. I didn't watch a lot of TV in those days. It's a little wilder back in those days than I am now, but that's too much about me on video. And by that I meant, I would drink milk and eat cookies and sit around and do my taxes. So anyway, I'm sure I can edit that out. I can edit that out later, can I? Yeah. Oh, okay, good. So what the Bill Cosby show was seen by a lot of people as, we can watch this because it isn't a black family that is sort of being culturally black and angry or anything like that, all these stereotypes. Rather, it was a black family that was, some would argue, assimilated in exactly the way that Hooks is arguing that the society was trying to get everyone to do in the black community. All these popular narratives, something's a narrative when it's kind of an explanation, right? These popular explanations of why assimilation should take place remind us that white supremacy prevails, okay? That racist oppression and exploitation, which assaults bodies and spirits in South Africa, assaults black people here. Okay, so we're getting closer to the end. This paper was apparently written when there was apartheid was in full swing in South Africa. I'm not sure how conditions are there now. I would imagine a little bit improved since official apartheid is over, but I'm embarrassed to say I've not kept up with the politics there, but that's what she's talking about in this article, is that black people should stand together wherever they're oppressed. Fundamentally, it is our collective responsibility as radical black people, radical black people. How radical is she? What does she mean by radical? To the best I can say, by radical, she just means black people who want to have equality, black people who want to be equal and treated with respect for who they are, rather than according to the color of their skin. So it's our collective responsibility, she says, so that's white and black, to construct models for social change, right? So she thinks it's the responsibility of white and black to construct models, to come to understandings of how the world should be. When she says to construct models, what I take her to mean is to sort of create a vision of what the world could be like, should be like, and to work towards that. It is our collective responsibility as people of color and as white people who are committed to ending white supremacy to help one another. It is our collective responsibility to educate for critical consciousness, that is to be critical thinkers. And in this course, we've emphasized critical thinking many times, and that's at its very simplest idea of critical thinking is to criticize your own thinking, not in terms of putting it down, but to think about opposing arguments to your own side so that you can have thoughtful conversations where you weigh different sides before you just pick a belief that feels right, or instead of picking a belief that just feels right. She discusses here in brief some regrets, for instance, that she has, that I believe that she has, but certainly that Malcolm X had, when he told a young white woman that there was nothing she could do for the black cause. She says, for each of us, it is work to educate ourselves to understand the nature of white supremacy with a critical consciousness. Black people are not born into this world with innate understanding of racism and white supremacy. We have to work to understand it together. We need to help each other. While it is important that individuals work to transform their consciousness. Now, this is that dichotomy here between the individual and the social level. The kind of think about the kind of white supremacy that goes on with someone who puts on a sheet or something drastic like that, or just somebody who is constantly griping about somebody who's complaining about people who are of a different color, versus the society level privileging of white people. So while it is important that individuals work to transform their own individual consciousness, striving to be anti-racist, it is important for us to remember that the struggle to end white supremacy is and I would just underline this in huge letters here, that this is what I'm really trying to get across in this course, or at least in this section of this course, is a struggle to change a system, a structure. It's not just about individuals, it's about trying to change the structure. Certainly changing one's own consciousness, trying to become more enlightened, is extremely important. Certainly one of the, maybe the first step in helping to change the structure. But I think what Hooks would argue is that changing the structure, changing the system is something we all have to do together. For our efforts to end white supremacy to be truly effective, individual struggle to change consciousness must be fundamentally linked to collective effort, right, to transform those structures that reinforce and perpetuate white supremacy. I hope that this video has helped to make sense of an article that already makes sense. It's wonderfully written, very direct, but maybe some of the historical background may be unfamiliar. Some of the historical background may be unfamiliar to some younger folks. So I hope that this video has helped and hasn't been too wordy. And I hope everyone has a nice day, a nice evening, a nice life. And was there anything else I wanted to say? I guess not. Thank you for your time and attention. Bye.